Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you everyone so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Whether this is your first webinar or maybe you've attended all three, we hope that you get a lot out of it from today. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Caroline Allen and I am the Vice President of the YAS Prize. I am so proud to be here today to share a little bit more about our first tenet in the STOP acronym, which all has to do with sustainability. And this is such an important pillar because it really holds up the rest. Yet we feel that a lot of our applicants or potential applicants have a lot of misconceptions about this sustainability principle. So we're hoping to break all those down, give you a lot of good information, a lot of good inspiration as you work on your application, and as well as at the end, answer any questions. Today, I'm also joined with two of our favorite finalists from last year, Chris from Oakmont Education and Mike from Sail Future. So you'll hear from them what this principle means to them in the middle of our webinar. And then, as I mentioned, we'll take question and answer from the end. So this should be obvious, but a lot of people don't know that sustainability looks different in every single state. This is the PPI index, which stands for Parent Power Index. And this is where the Center for Education Reform gives states an A, B, C, D, or F letter grade based on how sustainable they are, how much they give parents autonomy and choice over their kids' education, really with the focus on utilizing public dollars that fund entities where students are learning. So what states are doing that really, really well? Josephina, my colleague who's here to support us today, is going to put in the chat the PPI index in case you want to visit the website to learn even more. But the reason I put this chart in here to start is, you can't in many ways control where you open up. Like you might have grown up in the state that you're working in, or you may have found that, New Orleans needs really good schools and you want to open up a school there, or you want to build your business or organization there. And that all is valid, right? So just because you're not in a green state, meaning the green states are our Floridas and our Arizonas, which have an A in terms of the PPI index, doesn't mean that you're not qualified or eligible to apply for the YAS Prize. And also I want to point out, Oakmont Education, where Chris is working right now, is in Ohio, and that's a B state. And Mike from Sail Future is in Florida, which is an A state. However, and they're going to talk about that, but they also, we have awardees from California. We have awardees from Illinois and, North Dakota. North Dakota got an F. And Corey Steiner of Northern Cass School District was one of our finalists. So this is information. It's helpful for you to use this to frame maybe your short answer for sustainability, but by no means is this the only criteria for which you are evaluated. So I want to give 3 examples of states, and these states range from states that have really low sustainability metrics in place because they have no legislative support to high. So starting with California, we know that schools, private schools or charter schools or micro schools in this state, have no legislative support where the funding does not follow the students. And so usually significant fundraising has to take place in order to be able to provide an education that is accessible and equitable to all students. We do have many applicants from California, or I'm sorry, we have many awardees from California. Da Vinci Rise was one of our awardees last year, our semifinalists, led by Aaron Whalen. And again, we took that sustainability into context when thinking about his application, but he had such a transformational and outstanding school that kind of overrode the fact that he was lower on the sustainability continuum. A middle state that has, some level of sustainability would be a place like Georgia, where there are some legislative frameworks in place to somewhat assist schools. We have SOAR Academy here, who we were just able to visit recently in Evans and Augusta, Georgia. And they get some funding, particularly for their students who are receiving special education services on IEPs. But they do not get like that full support or subsidized support or really any, it makes an impact, but it doesn't, they still have to do significant work to make up those other dollars that, a traditional public school would get. And then Arizona, obviously you saw, is one of our A's, thanks to, Governor Ducey and their legislature. They have a high level of sustainability, meaning, that, and one of our awardees last year was Love Your School, and they work on connecting parents with their education options. Because we all know just opening up the education options, like, it doesn't make it easy for parents to know what's out there and what's the opportunity for their students. So this allows, this creates really a sustainable model where organizations don't have to over rely on philanthropy or fundraising in order to make ends meet, or in order to, make education equitable and accessible to all. So as you can see, those 3 states are very, very different, right? And that goes to all the 50 United States. But just because you have a low PPI score, or just because your state does not legislatively support, utilizing public dollars to follow students, doesn't mean that you're not eligible to apply. And so when I get to the part where I interview Chris and Mike, they can talk a little bit about, the application process and what this looks like for them, and how you can really, think about sustainability in terms of what is currently the options in your state, but then also how are you pushing, to advocate for more sustainable outcomes and measures for your state at a local, a state, or a national level. So it's just as much about the pushing for the support of this as it is like living it out in actuality. Just a reminder logistically about our application deadlines and dates for 2023. We just finished up our roadshow, and we're going to have an exciting page on our website, which really features all of them. So please check that out. Our application deadline is July 15th at 11:59 p.m. Our quarterfinalists will be announced in Washington, D.C. on mid-September. October, we will be bringing all 64 quarterfinalists to Cleveland, to Chris's home state, where we will, at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, take our 64 and break them in half to arrive at our 32 semifinalists. Then we will bring those 32 semifinalists to the Yas Prize Accelerator in Miami, Florida. We have a whole entire webinar coming up soon just on the accelerator and the power of that. So I know that webinar is not until, I believe, early June, but that's one to definitely keep your eye out for. And then we wrap up in December with our finalists and our winner revealed. So this is the most exciting part, because I can share a little bit about sustainability, but my 2 speakers, our 2 alumni, really are living and breathing it, and have probably various different perspectives, and have probably, I'd also love to hear how their thinking about sustainability has transformed, because of the Yas Prize. But all that to say, I'm going to start with Chris. Chris is the Vice President of Oakmont Education. Chris, I'm going to have you give like a 1-minute spiel of who you are, what you do, and then I have an exciting video to share about from our recent road trip visit to Oakmont. Go for it, Chris.
Great. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Chris Gillespie-Worrell. I am the Vice President of Oakmont Education. We are an operator in Ohio, and we operate 16 not-for-profit dropout recovery schools across the state, and we have an emphasis on credentialing, career technical education, and placement. So a little bit quickly about our students. Our average student is around 18 and a half years old, reads around 4th or 5th grade reading level, has around 20% of the credits they need. So we are working with students that have dropped out of high school and effectively are out of school youth. So really exciting. Quick fact, I was a former at-risk dropout kid. So we have some unique perspectives in our organization, I think helps us with that sustainability model that we have. So thanks again for having me.
Of course. Okay, I'm going to share an awesome video that we just got the chance to go to Cleveland to visit our finalists in action. And so one of the people we visited was Chris and her amazing team and her really incredible students. So it's about a 1-minute video, and then we'll go over to Mike.
Don't be afraid to ask really simple questions, because until they're answered, you can't really progress. And that's what's so great about this kind of education, is that it's really here for your future, here to how you want to learn, and what's going to make you guys succeed.
So that's just a little teaser, a little sneak peek at how incredible Oakmont Education is. And if you do get a chance to become one of our awardees and visit us in Cleveland when we are at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, maybe we can do some trips to visit your schools, because we're going to be there. And so might as well make that an opportunity. Next up, we have Mike from Sail Future. Mike, do you want to give us a 1-minute spiel of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Long with Sail Future. I am, one, so excited to be here, but two, so excited to see that video of Chris and her team in action at Oakmont. One of the greatest parts of this experience and being a part of the YAS community is getting to develop some soul friendships and partnerships with people like Chris. She is definitely my spirit animal. Sail Future is based in St. Petersburg, Florida. We are a nonprofit high school, grades 9th through 12th. And we take students sailing around the world as part of their educational experience. Sustainability to us comes in all facets, and I'm super excited to have that conversation and talk about what that looks like at every level.
Awesome. Okay. So we also got the chance to visit Sail Future. They were our first roadshow visit. So we started off in sunny Florida, and so you can take a peek of what that looks like for students, not only sailing around the world, but designing and rebuilding and working on these ships. It was really incredible. Here we go.
So when we saw the application, for Sail Future, and Mike spoke, so he just did such a great job in our accelerator, presenting your story and the need and the demand for this kind of education.
Sail Future is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We're an umbrella that has lots of different programs. We do residential foster care, we do mental health, we do job training, we do a number of different things, but we also have a subsidiary for-profit company.
Is it hard to learn?
Me personally, I find it fun.
So I don't know about you, but I didn't have schools like that in my backyard. So I am jealous of the opportunity your students have and your staff have to, build teams that really are able to support students and give them a different type of education than we might have had access to. Chris and Mike are truly redefining what pre-K to 12 education looks like. So excited to have you here. Today we're focusing on sustainability. So I want to spend the next 15 or so minutes talking about that. Mike, I'll start with you. What questions should applicants or potential applicants be thinking about or asking themselves to better understand their current level of sustainability as an organization?
Gosh, great question. What questions should applicants be asking themselves about sustainability? Financially, right? Like how, that's the obvious one. How sustainable is your financial model? That is critically important. The work we're doing is generational, and having a school pop up for a couple of years and then not be able to make it will do more harm than good. And so really making sure that you're building a model, a financial model that support that type of education you're trying to provide in the long term. I would start there for sure.
Awesome. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that obviously the financial component, and I think, asking if there's ways outside of the financial component that you are able to influence sustainability. Are there ways, what does your network of connectivity look like? Do you know people that have ways that can help you influence sustainability in ways of policy, funding, development with fundraising, and all of those ways? Because there's so many ways, sustainability is like a net of different ways you keep your kind of dream and mission alive. So I think that just taking a moment to think about, I think more people have connections to influence sustainability than they realize.
Let's talk a little bit about the why. And Mike, you brought this up a little bit about how, we want to build schools that are, because many of our schools are newer, right? They haven't been around for 50 years. But we want to build something that is true and important and sustainable for our communities, because we all know that popping up and then failing is not going to be good in the long run. So why is it important to build a model that is sustainable? And this might seem obvious, but would love your reflections. Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to build a sustainable model for the reasons you mentioned, because it's not fair or appropriate to build something that's unsustainable to people, because that's pretty self-serving. It's not what all of us, I hope, are here to do, is to build sustainable models that eventually, like for us, for dropout schools, I'd love for one day for us to be out of business and there is no dropout, and we've evolved into some sort of more innovative model because no one's dropping out anymore. But yeah, I think, yeah, that's, yeah.
Mike, what about you?
Earlier I said I think it's important to think about sustainability at every level, right? It's not just that does your revenue that you bring in every year cover your expenses. It goes beyond that. Is the role that your intervention specialist plays sustainable to that person, right? Is the work that you're asking someone to do sustainable and reasonable at every level for every position? Your teachers, your dean, your head of school. Is the entire model sustainable, and does your financial model support that? Because then you can have some really fired up and passionate folks that will sacrifice themselves for a couple of years, but then if those folks move on, who's going to be able to come in and take their place? So making sure those roles are sustainable, and that's baked into your financial model too.
There are some things that we have control over related to sustainability. And then there's some things we don't have control over. Like you have control over your budget and how much you pay teachers and what building you reside in. But you often don't have control maybe of like what state you want to be in. If you grew up in Florida and you have this really awesome idea to be in Florida, like that's where you want to be. And you're not going to go to another state just because maybe, even though Florida is a bad example, because you do have some higher levels of sustainability. But would love to hear from each of you. What are one or two things that you have done as you're leading your organization to impact your level of sustainability? Chris, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think I'm going to talk about data. I think that making sure that we look at how we collect and utilize our data, our outcome data, placement data, so that we can paint a better picture of what our success looks like, because that success is really what drives our sustainability. Because when you're out there talking to policymakers or fundraising, whatever aspect that might be, people want to see the results that you have impacted change, that you are, people want to see a return on their investment. And in order to be sustainable, you have to show that with data. So I think that data is a critical component, not only how you collect it, but how you aggregate it and disseminate it and communicate it, and understanding the different audiences for your data. So I think for me, that's my number one thing, is just making sure that data is correct and that you have multiple ways to communicate it to different audiences so that it's digestible and gets the point across quickly.
And actually, before I go to Mike, Chris, can you talk a little bit about the work that you do in terms of policy? I know that you're right now not in Ohio, right? When you're working, are you in Ohio right now?
Yeah, I am in Ohio. So we're working on our budget. It's our biennium budget. And we are we are actively working with, we have engaged lobbyists that we work with, and we advocate during that budget process almost every single day, where we make sure people that are responsible for power and influence over the school budget and career tech budget understand the work we're doing, understand the impact, which is why, being part of this YAS Prize is so incredible, because the video that you all saw at the beginning of this, I've referenced that in our testimony. Like, it's just compressed what I can't even communicate verbally. So engaging in ways that might make you a little uncomfortable. I've been doing testimony for years and years and years, and I still, I almost choked on air the other day. I was starting to choke on air, and I was like, here it is, I'm dying on the floor, but it didn't happen. And I collected myself, and I had a little frog voice for 20 seconds, but just making yourself uncomfortable, showing your students part of it, that was kind of cool when we began to expose our students to it and saying, this is kind of your house, let's go testify. It's exciting to engage in those ways. So making your staff engaged in policy,
and what exactly are you, what is the goal? What is the dream? What exactly are you fighting for?
We're fighting for equitable funding in Ohio, because I love the work that our career tech centers are doing in Ohio. Incredible. But you need a 2.5, you have all these criteria. Our students are not able to get in. And I hear them saying, it's really great that you gave us $100 million this budget. And I almost fall out, because that's holy mackerel, that's crazy. I couldn't imagine what we would, do with that kind of funding. But we're just there trying to get additional funding so that we can provide students who've dropped out with credentialing and placement. And I think that it's something that we're finally getting some support from diverse perspectives in the legislature. But that's taken a really long time. It's taken a really long time. And there's been periods of years of no success and just beat down. So that speaks to the sustainability part that Mike talked about. Is what you're projecting for yourself also sustainable? And if not, who are the people around you that can help you?
And sharing that in your application, right? We don't expect perfection, but we do expect progress, like Chris, right? And even if there's slow, steady, right? Convincing and testifying and showing the data and showing the videos, right? That is really powerful, because a lot of schools or a lot of school leaders or a lot of organizations or businesses are not doing that. They're just kind of keeping on and not actually pushing the needle on where we want to go. What's that dream? Mike, what are you doing at Sail Future to think about, where you want to be in terms of sustainability, both on a legislative level and on a, running your school level? Oh, I'm mute. Sorry. You're good.
Sorry, thanks. It is really hard to provide a outstanding education to students with the dollars that the state provides, whether you're in an A state, a B state, a C state. Those PPI scores are awesome, but it is still really hard to do that with those dollars. So to anyone that is on this call, I imagine you're not going to settle for providing anything less than something that is outstanding to your kids and your families, which means you also have to figure out a way to bring in additional resources to support that above and beyond what your state provides. And I'd encourage everyone to think really far outside the box about where those resources might come from. The way Sail Future's gone about doing that is we have gotten ourselves licensed and accredited across a number of other verticals to draw down other available resources that typically don't come into schools. An example is we're a licensed mental health agency in the state of Florida. All of our students qualify for Medicaid for the most part, so we were going to provide mental health services anyways because our kids need that, and embedding that into the school makes sense. But then being able to draw down resources through Medicaid to pay for those services like individual therapy and group therapy and family counseling then makes that small component of the school a little more sustainable. Doesn't pay for everything, right? But it helps get it closer. Another example is, we believe in work-based learning. Our students are in internships and apprenticeships all throughout their 4-year experience. We've partnered with our local Career Source agency, which is a workforce partner, to draw down WIOA dollars, which there's lots of those dollars in every state in America. we were already going to do job training and workforce development as part of our education model. Being able to morph ourselves into a structure that fits the local workforce board allowed us to then pull down dollars through that agency that otherwise wouldn't typically come into a school. There's a few more examples of that, but I imagine what everyone interested in starting the school is doing is trying to do something different and outside the box and be really creative about where those resources might be and be flexible enough in your model to find a way to make yourself fit into their funding stream.
And Mike, can you talk a little bit about your for-profit and how that impacts your sustainability at Sail Future?
For sure. Again, we wanted our students to be involved in work-based learning. Our students are all come from very different backgrounds and aren't necessarily equipped with the skills in ninth grade to go be placed in an external internship. There's a lot of failing forward that's going to happen there with not showing up to work on time, being disrespectful to a supervisor, not engaging in what they're doing. And rather than setting them up to fail by placing them in sort of outside corporate partnerships, we said, hey, for those first 2 years, our students are going to work in an internal subsidiary company where those coaching moments can happen. And we'll design a company that allows for that and supports that. And so we have a commercial construction company and a yacht refit and restoration business. Last year, we did about $1 million in revenue in our first year of operation, and all of our net income every year goes towards offsetting student scholarships at the school. So social enterprises can be a great way to bring in additional revenue. I will tell you that your donors, especially if any of those folks are in the business community, will be inspired to give more when they see that you're going out and finding ways to earn your own income. I would caution you with the idea of a social enterprise. You can really lose a lot of your time and attention towards your mission if that isn't programmatically aligned with what you're already trying to do. And for us, wanting to do work-based learning and wanting to teach those skills through those trades anyways, it makes a lot of sense.
And so the takeaway here is not that you should be like Sail Future and, start up your own, yacht restoration for-profit, or to be just like Chris at Oakmont, but really that there's lots of different ways to think about sustainability. And you have to do what works for you and your organization and what's going to push that needle forward. So I hope that this gives some more breadth and depth to this principle. I'm going to give one more question to each of our alumni. And then for the people who are watching today, the Q&A feature is where we're going to be answering questions in about a couple minutes. So if you do have questions, start to populate them, not in the chat, in the Q&A portion, and we'll get to them very soon. So Chris, what is some last advice that you have? Everyone here is either thinking about applying or they're starting to apply. And one of the questions they're going to have to answer is, how are you working to be sustainable? With the emphasis that you do not have to be 100% sustainable to apply. But what advice would you have for some of our potential applicants here? Oh, unmute, sorry. Show a little sign.
My turn. I think that my biggest piece of advice is to not be self-limiting, to think of this like we spend so much time saying that we're innovative in the education space, but a lot of times we're like innovative in a little like microcosm. So don't be self-limiting and think of this in a big way. Like we always think small, even when we're thinking big. So think about what your potential is. What are you capable of doing? What do you know that your team can do? What can your company do, your project, your school? And come from a place of positive, and that that you're going to be successful, and you'll be sustainable, and that you have what you need with the team that you've built. So I think that we are our own worst enemies, and that for us, I remember doing it, and we had a lot of self-limiting talk internally, like maybe we shouldn't, maybe we're not ready, like maybe this isn't it, or maybe we can't do this. And I think that is just, if the applicants can kind of get rid of that talk I think that they will see there's a lot more that they already have with regards to sustainability than they realize.
And Mike, I wanted to bring up, I know that you have, visited with us. So we bring our cohort and our alumni, invite them to different opportunities, whether it's a political opportunity or an innovation opportunity like ASU GSV. But Mike, you were on the trip to both DC and Oklahoma. Can you talk a little bit about those meetings, like what the purpose of those meetings were and how they connect with sustainability, even though they weren't in the state of Florida?
Right. So we met with governors from all over the country when we were in DC together, and these were all governors that had a deep interest in education and figuring out how they can move their states to be more permissionless and outstanding for their students and families. And we had the awesome opportunity to just share our perspectives and experiences. And it was great for a lot of those governors because we weren't asking them for anything necessarily. We were just saying, hey, this is how you provide an incredible education to your kids and families, and the structures that support that and the ones that don't. And the opportunity to do that was pretty incredible. And it led to a group of us going out to Oklahoma to meet with the governor out there and a number of the members of their legislature, and to see that there are folks in major leadership positions across the country that are actually interested in this gives me hope that one day these resources at a state level will become more and more available. And the amazing work that Chris is doing will no longer be the exception, but the norm if these conversations continue to happen. And if folks like this, all of you who are on the call, continue to say, hey, like subpar isn't good enough. Our educational options should be diverse and exceptional. And we're going to put the work in to create schools that make that true. That's going to be what inspires policymakers to see that vision and then make the resources available.
Awesome. We are going to turn it over to your questions now to make sure in the last 8 minutes or so we get your questions answered. So please, if you have a question, we are happy to answer it in the Q&A portion, not the chat. So Connie had a question for you, Mike. What is the name of the model or the group within government that is the resource for partnering with area businesses? I think you mentioned something.
So one of our partners is a workforce board. All states and counties generally have one. I don't know if that's what she was referring to.
I think so. If you can expand on that a little, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so federal government has a program called WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which provides job training dollars for youth and adults. Those typically flow through a state agency and then through some operating agency in your county or district. There's two primary buckets of resources. One is for training and the other is for paid work experience. And so the way those resources come to us is as a school or a subsidiary company, we're not necessarily having to pay the hourly wages of our students. On average, our kids will make $10,000 to $15,000 before they graduate from high school in paid wages. That's coming through the paid wage program through the Workforce Act. Second to that is the job training dollars, which helps offset our cost of instruction to provide that job coaching and the direct instruction that students are receiving in the school that supports that workforce readiness.
Awesome. Someone else, I know Josephina also typed out the answer. I had a question about people who are not currently serving schools or serving students and what that looks like in terms of, you might be a nonprofit who works with schools and works with students, but not in a direct capacity like Sail Future and Oakmont. And we definitely encourage you to apply. I think our one caveat would be, what is that as close to direct impact that you're having on students? As you can see from our awardees, most of them are the direct provider, the direct, like working as closely with students as possible. And we're not likely to fund something that focuses on teacher development or focuses on a mentoring program that's after school or focusing on a tutoring program or mental health services after school. It's not to say that those things are not important. They are, as a former teacher, I know that those wraparound services are critical, but in terms of the foundation's mission and goals, we really want to make sure that the 8 to 3 or the 7 to 4, whatever that school day is, that, you know, like Mike said at the beginning, that's the most outstanding, you know, option for kids. And so again, it's just that we're not going to necessarily fund, you know, things that are more supplemental or less direct as not connected to students. Taylor's asking enrollment, we have more registered. So in terms of eligibility, you need to be currently working with students. And that could mean you opened in January, that can mean you opened in September, doesn't matter to us. You have to be currently working with students. You have to be working in the United States, and you have to be working with pre-K to 12th students, 12th grade students, and some span of that. And as you can see from Chris, how were you a little bit confused at first about that pre-K to 12, because your students, you know,
yes, because our students are overage. So I think that again, like, think of it, if you have questions, also there's open office hours, which are really, really great I think you're still doing those, Caroline, correct? If people have questions, I wish we would have utilized those a little more, but yeah. So just, again, the self-limiting, but also like reaching out instead of assuming, you know, that, like, instead of just like discounting yourself, being like, well, we can't do it because I assumed this, contact somebody and ask.
Right. We have office hours every Friday from 12 to 12:30 Eastern time on Zoom. And Josephina will definitely put that link to office hours. Thank you, Josephina, in the chat. And again, right, like, we have the eligibility criteria there as a way to kind of have parameters and guidelines. And, but we also know that a lot of schools and organizations look different. And so tell your story, tell the story of your students, because that really is what stood out for, you know, at least these two applicants in particular. Is a tuition-based school that also accepts state-funded scholarships for students considered sustainable? Chris or Mike, do either of you have a thought on that question? Tuition-based school. Oh, Josephina, do you mind? Or let's see, sorry. Let me just see the tuition-based school that also accepts state-funded scholarships for students. How would you think about sustainability with that? Either of you have a thought?
Yeah, I would think about the last letter of the YAS Prizes acronym, which is permissionless. And so is your tuition model going to create access and be permissionless to folks that may not have the resources to afford that tuition? I don't want to speak for Caroline, but I do think that that is an important consideration for all of us in this space to create educational opportunities that are accessible to everyone, not just those with the means to pay. So I would imagine that having a tuition-based model is okay. And I would expand upon that very clearly to say how you're creating access and making sure that's permissionless to everyone.
And we definitely did have awardees last year who are tuition-based schools, have that, you know, that range of, you know, not some students go for free, some students pay the full. And there is a question in our application about your student demographics and ensuring that you are working for and with a population that is underserved. And we purposely don't define what it means to be underserved because that would be too limiting, right? Mike's students are exceptional, but look different than Chris's students, right? And we couldn't put together a definition that, you know, speaks to both of those students that need really a personalized, individualized, you know, rigorous education. And so what makes your, why did you choose the students that you work with? Why did you choose to build this model for the students that might have not been served in another school well, or weren't served holistically? You know, I know both of you, Mike and Chris, you provide such wraparound services to educate the whole child. So tell us about your students, you know, what makes them thrive, you know, under your leadership. So, well, thank you so much, Chris and Mike. It's always so great to see you, whether it's virtual or in person. Obviously, we love attending and visiting your schools. It's always great to connect. I appreciate your thoughts and your inspiration and your wisdom that you've shared. It was only 1 year ago that you were in many of their shoes. Do you have any final words for our applicants who hopefully will be on this webinar with me next year? Do you have any thoughts, last words of encouragement?
I love what Chris said. Be bold. Don't limit yourself. Put it all out there. This is a pretty, as far as a grant opportunity goes, and where there are judges, it's a pretty judgment-free zone. The folks here are really just looking for innovative ways to and organizations that embody that acronym. And so, you know, in your application, think about STOP. Think about what those words mean and how they apply to you, and be bold with what you write. Yeah,
and Mike, he is like I believe in twin flames as friends, and I really believe that we are that, and hopefully we'll get to know people on this webinar in the future. But I think, share your story, one of my mentors has a book called No Struggle, No Progress, Dr. Howard Fuller, and he taught me to not be ashamed of my struggle, and to share my story and to share it boldly. And that was part of what made me work with a group of students that I work with. So to all of you out there that feel like, oh, I can't share this part of my story because it's too this, or I was too that, or I was to everything, and share your story, because the more you share, then you're going to meet people that are like, me too. Oh, me too. And then you realize that the group of people around you is as remarkable as anyone you've ever met. So it's exciting, but please share your stories, because what makes you unique is what makes you a YAS finalist, honestly.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I feel like we give away money, and that's what drives a lot of people to us, right? Because we're always looking for, other ways to make our organizations grow and scale. But ultimately what you walk away with are these connections and these friends. And not that people are applying to make more friends, but it's this idea that like Chris and Mike would have never met, right? And the fact that their organizations will be better and stronger because they've met each other, and because they know each other exist, and they're able to build off each other and the entire other community. This is just 2 people out of 64 that just last year alone are doing, are redefining what pre-K to 12 education looks like. 2 quick resources before we all head off. On Wednesday, May 17th, we are going to be joined with another alum, Dr. Steve Perry, to talk about what is transformation. We were just at his school in Connecticut, Capital Prep Schools, and I'm excited to dive into that T principle for STOP. And then as we mentioned, Chris mentioned, we have office hours every Friday. So tomorrow from 12 to 12:30, informal drop-in, no registration required, yasprize.org/office hours. I'll be there, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have. Chris and Mike, thank you so much. Thank you to the 50 of you who showed up to join us and take time out of your day. You know where to find us, yasprize.org, and be in touch soon. Thank you all. Bye.